Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Founders Roadmap. Today, we're talking about the long game and how to build a business meant to last not just years, but generations. My guest today is Lisa Linkowsky, founder of Milestone Franchising. Lisa helps entrepreneurs navigate the franchise landscape and find businesses that can become family legacies. Lisa, I love what you do. I've literally never met anyone who has the job that you have. So instead of me kind of giving the introduction, I would love if you could introduce your work, a bit about Milestone Franchises and like your path into getting to this world of franchising.
Absolutely, Morgan. And thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that. And it's funny because I hear that all the time that people have never heard of someone doing what I do. And it's
Ever.
very intriguing and it makes for good cocktail conversation for sure.
Yes.
And just this morning, I was out in the chilly New Jersey air at a grand opening of a franchise in my local community right around the corner as part of my chamber. I was there as a member of my chamber and as a franchise advisor. So, it's just wonderful to see new people in my community opening up a business. But I've been in the franchise world, Morgan, for going on 12 years, and I was a franchise owner myself. I was not looking for that. I'm a third generation business owner, had zero interest in owning a business, and it all just kind of landed and came together. And I ended up becoming a franchise owner myself. I was a multi-unit owner for Central New Jersey and Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Ran my business for 6.5 years. And during that time, I had watched people not do so well. And it was very concerning to me. And I said, how are they not doing well? But I did well. I don't understand that. And I started seeing patterns and common threads of why they were not doing well. And I said, all right, in my next act, I'm going to help people to understand more what this world is and even more important, what it's not. And so for the past 5 years, Milestone Franchising has been helping people across the country to guide them either into franchise business ownership or far, far away from it, which is just as important.
When you look at a business, and I like that you work with sort of small businesses, kind of when you look at something and you think this deserves to have kind of longevity behind it. When I think of franchises, I think of like the big corporate conglomerates, right? And you see like a new McDonald's popping up on the street every now and then. So, what is it to you like when you look at small businesses, what makes you say like this could be franchised? Or like when you approach a business leader who's doing something really well and they have multi generations and multi, I don't know, stores opening, let's say, with their business, and you think like, I think this would benefit as like a franchise from different areas, and it would really boost their business and keep it sustainable rather than just this one off.
So, great question. And I will say to you that I argue and battle with people on a regular basis who think that franchises are just big, giant corporate conglomerates. And I'm always out there championing my local franchises to say, no, these are local business owners that live in your community. There are some investors that will own, 12 Planet Fitnesses. And yeah, they're not like, you're not going to see them. They're not coming and visiting in there, but they're the one off. It's really the husband and wife with their kids that sit there and they're running that business and they are there and you get to see them and they're part of the community and they're helping to support the community. But to come to your question, Morgan, part of what I do is advising businesses that want to explore becoming a franchise, right? Because there's 4,000 franchises out there. And at one point, they had one location. And then what happens is that the community comes in and says, I'm traveling 30 minutes to get over here. Can you put one over there somewhere? And then someone comes in from the other side and they're like, hey, I'm coming 30 minutes from that direction. Can you put one over there? And so that entity starts sprouting out little other locations in their nearby community, right? Satiating that that thirst for the community of whatever it is that they're offering and whatever services that they are providing that people are traveling from far and wide to come to. And what I tell people is, are they buying because of you? Or are they buying because there's a need, right? There's a big difference. Like if you are like the
Yeah.
mainstay in the community and everyone's known you and it's generational and everyone loves you, but outside of that community, do you matter? Like if a tree falls in the woods, does anyone hear it? Same thing. So yes, start building out and sprouting out where you're not as well known to see, does it have legs? And if you build this in Idaho, will people come or will they not come because they don't know what it is and they don't know what it's for? And so that's the first piece is whatever it is that you're offering, is there a big enough need outside of the local community that just tends to get into habit supporting you? Make sense?
It does, and actually, I guess I should back up a little. What technically makes a business a franchise? Because if I open up a bookstore, a small bookstore, and I need to grow, I'm like, I need to have more inventory. I need to open up another shop. I call it the same name. Is that technically a franchise, or is that just an expansion? Like, what's the
That's
difference between
correct.
growth and franchise?
That's correct. So, scaling in a franchise model is where you are having investors come in and investing in your model, your business, and they're actually taking on the shoulder of that inventory so you don't have to do it, right? They're coming in, they're buying into this business and saying, I want to run this business as you have laid out. So there's very strict rules in the franchise world, something called a franchise disclosure document, and then your franchise agreement that you as the prospective investor are saying, I agree to all these rules. I am going to make sure that I honor it and I take care of the brand the right way and I'm taking care of all this, but I am shouldering that investment to go build it in Kansas, and make it happen because I love it. And I think that this is going to do really well here in my community. So that agreement, and going back when you mentioned about McDonald's, you cannot sit there and run out of ketchup midday as a franchise owner and run to Costco and go get more ketchup. You have to utilize the ketchup that has been sanctioned by McDonald's so that that flavor and everything is the exact same everywhere. And so same thing with a franchise. You know exactly what to expect. You know exactly what it is. You know exactly, and that's really why franchising came about, by the way, because, well, for McDonald's, fun fact, because people wanted a familiar thing as they were traveling on the roadway and they would see those golden arches. And it was a sense of comfort and like security that, you were traveling long time ago before phones and all that other stuff. And you were like, ooh, that's a good place to go. And you knew exactly what to expect.
It still is. I don't eat
Right.
meat, but every time I see one, I'm like, I know what the coffee's gonna be. I know what the bathroom situation's gonna be.
Yeah.
So it has lived up to that legacy still from like 1940 something, whenever it was created. On that note, I do kind of want to talk about these big, like familiar franchises that people like me probably, when you say what's a franchise, they probably name the Taco Bells, the KFCs, the McDonald's. I read an article recently, I think it was either in Forbes or Wall Street Journal, one of those, where they're talking about how the space that those buildings are built on is really what's valuable about the franchises these days.
Mm.
So that's why all of them are being kind of built as bland, gray, just boxy buildings, and they all look the same, and how they're losing that like personality that they used to have. So in your mind, with like businesses you work with and the research you do within the franchises, do you think most founders today are building for longevity or for the exit, knowing that that payout might be a little bit more than what they invested into it?
Controversial answer coming at you, Morgan. So ready yourself. Unfortunately, private equity has become a big player in the franchise model. And I see people that want to start a franchise and they're thinking already about when they can sell. Right. So they're starting the brand as a franchise and they're going, well, when can I sell? And they're already thinking about it. Where it used to be, you would never even consider private equity would never even come knocking until you were 20 years in the game with your brand and you had hundreds of locations. And now I'm seeing private equity knocking when they've got just a few and they're just a couple franchises in and they're considered an emerging franchise, which is slightly horrifying to me because they have not proven out their model yet. Same thing for the business owner. I don't see it as much for them, for the franchisee, the investor coming in. I don't see them being thinking in that way as much as the franchisor, the system, right? So they are sitting there looking at that play and a shorter play. And I remind everyone when I'm advising them about becoming a franchise, I'm like, do not forget the reason why they're investing in you. It's because of you. And so when you sell to private equity and you're no longer part of that equation, what happens to your brand? What happens to the soul of your business model? And what happens to your investors that all came along because of you? Like, what happens? And you got to think about that. And what do you owe to them? And how much do you owe to them in that, right? And to your brand and to your legacy, to your point. But I don't see it as much on the franchisee side. But yes,
Good.
when you are looking to sell a franchise unit, it absolutely becomes much more profitable when you own the land that it's on, when you own the building, because then you can lease it now out to the next person that's coming in there.
Honestly, I think that really doesn't set up anyone for success because you're always going to be like on your toes if you're going to be kicked out for the next thing. And if that's going to be successful, you can't really build a sustainable anything with that sort of mindset.
Hey,
So,
listen, Morgan, we're never supposed to talk about politics, but when you think about it, that's exactly what happens in our political world.
yeah,
That they are constantly, the moment that they get elected, they're constantly starting to fundraise for their next election campaign. And because we don't have term limits, it just keeps going on and on and on. But yes, it's the exact same thing here. And it's not a healthy kind of way for the business model to really be successful for that longevity when everyone's sitting there looking over their shoulder going, well, who's cutting us loose or who's coming in to
yeah.
buy us or whatever it is.
Girl, we could talk about term limits in late stage capitalism for like 5 hours, and it would never make the cutting board on this podcast.
Understood. But I just sat there going, yeah, it's actually a correlation for sure.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I've never thought about that. I just thought it was kind of like a terrible way to do business, but that is the systemic problem that we're seeing kind of everywhere. So it makes sense. Um, and I've listened to you speak. I've read some of your blogs, and you've called franchising a ready-made framework for legacy in the past. Can you unpack that a little bit for me?
Yeah. So what I tell people is that business ownership is hard, right? Like it is not easy. It does not matter whether it's a franchise or whether it's a something that you're creating from scratch and you're going at it on your own. It's still hard. With a franchise, they're doing some of that heavy lifting for you. They've come up with a brand. They've come up with a proven model that is successful. At least they should have, and their numbers should meet that out in that franchise disclosure document. And they have created a marketing system and they've created training and they've created an ops manual. They've created all these things that if you and I were sitting here trying to come up with a business and we were like, hey, we really should come up with, whatever it is that we can come up with, that we don't know what we don't know. And we're just kind of trying to figure it out the entire time. They're already doing that. That's what you're paying for. You're paying for the idea that someone else has figured out most of it. They haven't figured out all of it because once you're turning from a corporate entity to a franchise, it's a different animal, different beast. You don't know how your investors are going to be. You don't know how the market's going to respond. You don't know all these other things. And so in the beginning, you're kind of fleshing that out. And I was in the early stages of my franchise when I was a franchise owner, and we were kind of working some of that stuff out in the beginning. But once you get to 20, 30, 50 locations, now you've figured it out, right? Or at least you should have. And so now the people are coming in and it's all figured out for them. They go to their training, they've got their marketing turned on. There are franchises where the moment they get back from their training, their phone is already starting to ring and they're receiving emails for business. That's not like that with a regular mom and pop. You're scraping and scrounging and doing everything that you can to try to figure everything out. So then the other beautiful part about this is that you have a built-in brain trust because you've got the other franchisees. So if you and I owned, let's say we owned a nail salon, we can't go ask the local nail salon how they've worked out around some obstacles. They're gonna laugh at us and go away. Like it's dog eat dog out here. Like, every man and woman for themselves. In a franchise, you get to work with all the other franchisees because you're not in competition with each other. You have your own protected territory. And so you get to sit there and call up the most successful franchisee and go, hey, I want to know how you address this, and can you help me out there? And that franchisee is benefited by everyone doing better in the system and going, yeah, this is how I handled it. And this is what I would recommend. And I made the mistake doing it this way instead of that way. And so you sit there and you learn from that whole brain trust. And where else do you get that from? Nowhere. And you go to annual conferences and you get to see each other. The franchisees that I came in through with my franchise, we are still in contact to this very day. And you
Wow.
become lifelong friends because you're all in that together trying to build something together, which is pretty remarkable.
I understand how that too, like, would help the brand equity long term and the sustainability of the brand and, like, helping the franchisees, get that extra cred to keep the business going and to probably open up more locations.
Yep.
For you as an advisor, what are some of the pitfalls of having to fall within that business's, like, code of ethics is the wrong word, but having to stay within that brand and not like branch out for certain marketing schemes or like wanting to do something really cool based in the community, just because the overall corporation is like, no, 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 that's not what we would do as a company. Have you found that there are some issues there with the back and forth?
So, not in that specific. I tell my clients who are all my clients are either in career transition or they're serial entrepreneurs. They either want to add on to their portfolio or they're looking to own a business for the first time. What I say to them is that you need to do business development from day one. You need to do guerrilla marketing. You need to be out there nonstop. You need to be joining your chamber and having a grand opening like what I attended this morning. You need
Absolutely.
to be out there doing everything for your business everywhere and being out there and being the face of your community to also get rid of that whole stigma that it's only owned by these big giant conglomerates, right? So the franchise system is never going to tell you not to do that. The biggest problem is having franchisees that don't do it. That's really the biggest problem. The issue is if you sit there and you have a franchise and you are offering widget X, and you decide on your own that you want to offer widget Y, and it is not something that the corporate entity has blessed, that is not okay. So what ends up happening is that the franchisees will come back to the franchise system and say, listen, we're getting asked for widget Y all the time. Can we look to add this on? And then the corporate will say, you know what? We have a corporate entity. Let's say they have 5 corporate entities that they still own and run. We will test market it here running widget Y through our business to see, does it work? What it should be priced at, how the community, how the consumer is responding to that. And if it does well, then we will roll it out as a franchise system. But the moment that people kind of
Oh.
start doing things themselves here and there, that's not a good thing. You don't want that. You want everyone kind of doing it the same way. And again, let corporate figure it out if it's something that they should kind of bend toward or pivot toward because competition is barking up their heel and they're going, listen, we've got competitors that are offering this. We need to offer this. Okay, let's make it happen. But let's do it the right way instead of the franchisees going rogue.
Interesting. So really that innovation is actually something that is encouraged as long as it's done the right way. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yes.
that's awesome. I had no
Absolutely.
idea.
Yes.
I
Now
was under the
listen,
impression it was the opposite.
now when you go to a McDonald's, which is a behemoth worldwide business, they're gonna pat you on your head and go, "Off you go, Morgan." Like, really, because they spend millions of dollars on consumer research and doing all the stuff that they're supposed to be doing, right? I'm not saying that it's not possible that a franchisee never came up with an idea that McDonald's implemented. I'm saying that in today, 2025, it's probably not. That's not realistic. But the
Right.
franchisees also could come to them as a group and say, "Hey, we really need to bring back the chicken wrap, the little dollar chicken wrap that just came back. They just brought it back. I saw the billboards for that. That could have been the franchisees going, listen, people are hurting, the economy, this was a big seller for us. We need to bring it back. And that could have been the franchisees coming back to the table and kind of putting pressure back on the corporate to listen to them.
That's awesome. I feel like if all the franchisees of all of these places could come together, we could fix the economy. Just be like, hey, people are poor now. Please help us.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. And okay, so kind of in that vein too, during it was like the peak of 2020, I was working, filming some commercials in my past life, filming some commercials for a small gym. It was a franchise, opened up in North Georgia. It was based in a company from Chicago, I want to say. That's where the headquarters were. And they were new to this. They were planning on opening up a second location. They got permission, they got all of the permits, whatever. The pandemic happened, and that put a complete halt to their second location. And really, they focused on the location they had, just keeping it alive during the pandemic. So, from your point of view, working as an advisor, I'm sure you had clients during that point too. How do you have any stories, I guess, from any of those and like how you kept them going with any advice as an advisor during that time or through recessions? I know the '08, you've been doing it for 12 years. So you,
Well, I
yeah,
was a franchise owner during the '08
yeah.
recession.
So
New
any,
Jersey was the last state to come out of it, so I was trying to get my franchise up and running during that time. And economically, for whatever reason, franchising does very well during economic downturn. So historically, when you look at franchise, the 2000 tech bubble, the '08, the pandemic, franchising bloomed and blossomed and exploded, right? It's
wow.
probably because people are on that, trying to find their own path and, they're just waking up out of their stupor of being, in that corporate grind and going, "Yeah, I'm done with this." But I have the best story for you, Morgan, because
Oh,
as a franchise owner, I lost my franchise due to the pandemic. So I was looking to sell my franchise the following year and then go into the advisory space. I was done. Like it was self-running. It was running on its own. I was ready for the next challenge. And I'd spent so much time with the franchisees in my system. But our whole system went down. So I am literally a product of a business owner in the pandemic losing their business. So who better to take advice from than a
yeah.
franchise advisor that's sitting there going, I lost my business. And then I started Milestone Franchising in literally the thick of the franchise, the pandemic. And when everyone was just on the move and the great resignation happened and the SBA loans were through the roof, they were breaking millions upon millions of applications, records year after year after year after the pandemic. And what I will say is that there were franchises that were out there that were doing an amazing job for their franchisees, and there were ones that were terrible. And in fact, there's something called the validation process for candidates when they get to speak to other franchisees in the system, other business owners, and ask them what it's like to be an owner. And one of my questions to this day is, how did they handle the pandemic for their franchisees?
Wow. Okay.
Because I know how it was for me. And I know that there were franchisees that were out there that were marooned, and there were others where the franchisors were helping do webinars on PPP loans and EIDL, and they were just doing everything and anything to help out their business owners. right? So it's a very near and dear question to my heart that I still have people ask to this very day.
I feel like I mean, your services would have been great for that gym just because they were small and they really I don't even know if they innovated or not. I'm pretty sure they started doing online courses and sold
Mhm.
those instead, which was a great way to innovate their solution during the pandemic, but
Yep.
I felt so bad for them because there was literally nothing that they could have done
Yeah.
differently with, like, how they were running their business, but I hope they're okay now. I need to check on them, but
Yeah.
that's very cool.
The fitness world got really, really harmed during the pandemic. It was really
Yeah.
difficult. And then there were others. I represent a brand called Gym Guys, and it's a personal training franchise. And Josh York, the founder, he sat there and immediately created an online virtual platform, and he boomed, he blossomed and boomed during that time, and is growing. And in fact, now is gone into international expansion. So it all is how well does that founder read the tea leaves of what's happening and either put their head in the sand or they go, I'm tackling this head on and I'm coming out in front of it. And those that are going to be strong and they're going to be forward thinking will survive. And those that don't go the way of the dinosaur. That's just the way that things happen.
So, kind of looking at the founder itself, and like when you take on a client, when you're looking at the survey that you give or the business itself, is the success and longevity something that you can intentionally design into a franchise system, or does it emerge from the people who run it? I guess, is it
Oh,
nature or
yeah.
nurture?
Oh, no, wait, that's all on the shoulders of the franchise system, the corporate system. But there are definitely things that I'm looking for. I represent 600 of the 4,000 franchises that are out there, right? Yeah,
Whoa. Okay.
a lot.
Cool. That's a
And
lot
so there
of
are
how do you sleep at night? That's
not well. I'm
yeah.
waiting for the cloning to happen so that I can, clone myself. But I work with other consultants across the country and we're in masterminds together and we are a brain trust with each other to say, "Hey, has anyone placed anyone with this franchise? How did it go?" And I talked about that franchise disclosure document. When an attorney goes through that franchise disclosure document, that FDD with one of my clients, they will either eviscerate it and gut it like a fish, or they will be like, yeah, this is all reasonable. They're well put together. Everything looks good. You take the numbers, you build a pro forma from that with your CPA. There's a whole way. And then doing validation where you can sit there and kind of put the stones in place so that you can have a solid foundation. What ends up happening all too often is that people end up during the middle of the night, they can't sleep and they go on this. And they start checking around and they end up in a franchise portal. They don't know what they don't know. And that franchise is going, yeah, this is amazing. And it's the best. And we make so much money and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And they don't do their due diligence where they get that fear of missing out because the franchise system says to them, you better act quick because we've got someone interested in your territory. You'd better move. And that person sits there and falls for it, hook, line, and stinker. And I end up meeting those people down the road and they're like, gosh, I wish I would have missed you. I would have met you because sitting there and talking to them about all the things that they need to do. And again, from the very beginning, when I said to you, or not do. Not everyone should own a business, Morgan. Not everyone should go to college. Not everyone should own a home, right? And not everyone should own a business. And there's a lot of times that I have to say to people, do not do this. Either they don't have the right finances, they don't have good business acumen, whatever it is. And I'm like, no, a franchise system is supposed to award you the franchise, but there are not great franchises out there that are like, come on in. Come on. And I stay far, far away from them.
Vulture systems,
Yeah, yeah,
basically. Yeah.
yeah.
So I understand that very well. What about those founders who cannot let go and they are way past their time of letting go and they need to give it to the next generation or just the next person who is better equipped to take over and kind of keep that business sustainable? How do you have that conversation?
Okay. All right. So franchising is all meant, it really is meant for legacy. There is no greater joy that I have than when I have a client and they say to me, I actually say to them, hey, what about your kids? Like, any thought about having them run into this? And they, like, a light bulb goes off and they're like, yes, that would be amazing. And we start talking about that. Or they come into it knowing that they're going to work shoulder to shoulder with their kid, right? There's never a negative about having that that dynamic involved, as long as they are letting that child, their adult child, run the business, and they're not saying no to them on everything, and they're treating them like a child, right? So it has to be a business relationship. But you have to remember that that parent does come with decades of experience and maturity that their adult child does not have, and so they should be wanting to take some of that. But if the adult parent is squashing and saying no to things and not helping the business to grow because that millennial knows that this is not how you should be running the business, right? Then that can become a problem. So it's a synergy that they've got to be very careful about in maintaining, and then allowing that adult parent to kind of step back further and further. They never have to step back fully, but step back. And then one day, yeah, now grandchildren come in. And now the grandchildren come in and now they're running it with with their parent. And now it just continues. So you can have owners out there that are 30 years with parent, grandparent, parent, grandchild, and then the grandparent goes off into the distance. Go retire, go enjoy your life.
I will say, having worked in like business development for a long time, I've partnered with major companies, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies, and they say they like to operate like a mom and pop, even though they're massive. And the
Mhm.
reason they say that is because their 80, 90-year-old CEO has to have their fingers at everything still.
Yeah,
And the business would run much more functionally,
if they
much
weren't there.
more financially if they just said, hey, I'm going to pass this up to the next person and let them use a computer. But yeah, that is a great way to approach it. So good work on your end.
Yeah,
Um,
you have to sit there and you have to understand, are they impeding the business? And if they're now a hindrance, then it's time to have a real serious discussion and say, you've done your time. It was amazing, but we've got this now.
so for someone listening who's thinking like, I would like to build something like this with my kids so they can inherit it, where do you start with that?
Mm. So I am an author for a contributor for Franchise Wire, as you mentioned before, and my latest article is about empty nest. I just wrote that 2 weeks ago, and what comes next? You're in this empty nest situation, and it is something that I talk to my clients about often, and that's why I wanted to write this article about it, because listen, people are living longer, and the idea of just retiring and doing nothing doesn't sit well for a lot of people that need to stay busy. And so they want something, and then bringing in their adult child into that can be amazing, right? And then also people are having a hard time finding a job out there. And so their adult child went to college, can't get a job in their field that they always wanted. They're dissatisfied. The parent doesn't want to retire. So there's all this dissatisfaction. So I go, all right, let's talk about business ownership. So I have an assessment that I give to my clients that shows what their business acumen is and how strong it is, and also measures their strengths and weaknesses so that we can see, is there a parity that we can sit here and come in and go, okay, all right, well, neither one of you have business development skills, neither one. So you would have to hire from that from the get-go. And are you understanding that? And if I get their understanding, then I'm like, okay, let's move on. You're really good with operations. You're really good with administrative work or whatever it is, right? So we sit there and start talking. And then we talk about, all right, I've got these 600 brands. Well, now let's talk about industries and what industries light your fire and which ones dim that energy, right? And now it narrows down further and further and further. And then you can talk about, do you want something that's business to business? Do you want something that's business to consumer? What kind of employee base are you looking for? Are you looking for minimum wage? Are you looking for professionals that you'd be working with? And then you sit there and now you've narrowed it even further and further and further, right? And then you get to the point you're like, okay, I have a couple concepts here that I think check all your boxes. Now I present it to them and now they start that process with me. So it's a very, very detailed process that I take tremendous pride in really doing that matchmaking. And again, coming to the point also of then also saying, I'm not recommending this to you because I'm keeping a keen eye out for red flags that I'm concerned about.
What are those red flags?
Oof, the biggest one, financial runway.
Yeah.
You do not have the finances to get into this and beyond what they're asking for. Like whatever the franchise is asking for, I'm going past it because we're in an expensive economy. Things are expensive. Minimum wage is expensive. Things are expensive. And if you do not have that financial runway to get yourself up and running, you will be done before you could get yourself started. And no one wants that. No one. So you've got to be prepared well financially, just like buying a home. Buying a home is no different. And sitting there and cutting corners to help people buy homes is not doing anyone a favor.
Nope.
And it's the same thing with business ownership.
This is kind of just a me question. I'm sure everything is different based on the business, the location, whatever. I understand that. Is there like a g general threshold of what it takes to open up a franchise business?
Financially, you
Yeah,
mean?
or is it all
Yeah. So
bespoke?
I represent concepts that my lowest concept is like around $75,000. And then I have
Oh,
concepts. Yeah. And then I have concepts that run to $3 million, like literally big, wide variety there. So
okay.
let's take a brand that is around 150,000, right? That's usually the sweet spot for a lot
That's
of the.
what I was expecting as, like, the minimum.
They're not brick and mortar, by the way. So that's super important to note that, not brick and
Okay.
mortar. And so you're looking at getting an SBA loan for that. And you're looking at getting a cash, you have to put down a cash injection, 10%, give or take on that 150. Then you're also having to pay your franchise fee up front, which is, anywhere between 20 to $30,000.
It is like
So I
buying a
would
house.
say $50,000 cash on hand. Then you need another $50,000 cash on hand that's there in case you need to touch it for other incidentals that are coming up and as you grow your business, right? So $100,000, and every franchise is different. Those $3 million businesses, they're going to require a lot more cash on hand. But $150,000 business, if you've got 75 to $100,000, then yeah, we can absolutely talk. Then I also represent vending, and vending doesn't require a lot more of that cash
Oh,
outlay. And so that's another area for people to look at. And that's business ownership. You're running your vending business.
yeah, you're opening up my world to so much. I mean, not that $75,000 is chump change, that's a
It's
lot of money,
it's a
but
lot of money.
that is, much cheaper than what I was thinking based
Yeah.
on, like, the housing market. I was like, "There's no way anything's gonna be under, like, $500,000 to open up
Yeah,
a
no,
store,"
when you're
but
talking, I really, my jam is businesses that are non-brick and mortar because you do not have that expensive lease. You don't have all the trappings that go with a brick and mortar. It does not mean I have a client right now, several of them that are looking at brick and mortar, but they are financially well capitalized. And that's the difference. Or I have people that are financially well capitalized that just do not want to spend that kind of money, so I'm like, let's look at these concepts that are really great, strong concepts for you.
actually, do you have, like, a favorite genre of business or industry, I guess, that you like to work with most? Like, when you get someone who's going into it, you're like, "Yes, another one."
So everyone's different and it pushes me out of my comfort zone. I had a client that I'm working with right now, and she had said to me, bring something trendy to me. And she's in one of the flyover states. And she said, I want what's trendy on the coast and I want to bring it to my hometown. And that was outside of my comfort zone because I don't do trendy. It's not my area. I run from trendy. It's not I'm very fearful of trendy, especially because the economy has been very, very wacky for the past 5.5 years. And so I'm looking at tried and true, sexy, unsexy, boring concepts. That stuff that's just humming along in the background. And I really had to push myself out of that comfort zone to sit there and show that to her, which she ultimately did not end up with. And I told her after she had made that decision that I actually was not a fan of the trendy space. And she was like, "You never made that known." And I'm like, "I know." So I would say to you, I really enjoy those areas that are just the quiet areas that are humming along. They are pulling in the money. They are doing well. They're tried and true. Think about I represent a few different concepts in the sign genre, like signs.
Okay, yeah.
Signs have been around since the caveman times, literally. When the first sign was drawn on a cave wall, right? It's been around. Signs are everywhere. They're everywhere. Everywhere you can think of, there are signs. So when I sit there and I look at things like that, or I look at companies that have something that's proprietary, or they're scaling back their royalty, which is what you pay as being an investor in a franchise system. When they scale it back and they started off at 6% and then they hit you with a reward as you hit your revenue milestones and
Mhm.
your royalty goes down, man, I will show that brand because they're thinking forward. They're thinking about the overall health of that system and they're rewarding you as the investor in that system. So it's not specifically genre, it's how that business is and what they're doing. How many revenue streams do they have? Are they B2B and B2C? Because now you just quadrupled your amount of business within your territory. I'm always looking for those types of things.
I'm gonna tell you immediately if someone asked me a sexy coastal beach thing to bring into middle state, I would have been like, easy airbrushing t-shirts from Panama City Beach. Put it in Iowa, baby. Let's get started.
There you go.
See what she says.
There you go.
Um, I wanna just briefly touch on technology since we are a technology company. There's all kinds of new AI automation coming in, both machines with documentation. Um, is there anything that you've seen that's really been like a great way to implement into these new businesses that make things a lot easier, affordable, or kind of future proofing for these business owners at all?
Yeah, so just for myself of what it is that I do, I'm like, AI, you're chasing right on me. Like, back it up.
Yep.
What I am concerned about, actually, Morgan, is that the franchise systems are utilizing AI too much, and they're taking the personal element out of things, and that's not a good thing. This is very much a trust based world that we're talking about. It is not a small endeavor that someone comes to you with their pot of money and they're going, "I want to invest in your business," right? And so the more that the franchisors are implementing AI and taking that personal piece out of it as they go through that process, that actually concerns me because it's you can sit there and you can, send out your bot messages about, this is our next step and whatever and doing all that, but I sit there going, there's a reason why realtors still exist when Zillow has been around forever and they've had every ounce of information that you can find about houses forever. You can take 3D tours, you can do everything online, and yet realtors still exist because that person wants their handheld because this is a scary proposition, right?
Yeah.
But having said that, there are things that can be automated from the franchisor end of how they are running their business and how the business needs to get customers and how their product is being made and how that business is functioning to make it more streamlined and more cost effective and more robust that absolutely they should be utilizing AI. I just don't wanna see them using the AI on this side when someone's just trying to get into a business. Does that answer your
Yeah.
question?
I mean, just listening to you talk, I could get in Chat GPT and be like, how do I open a franchise? Which one should I do? And it could give me answers, but it's not going to give me the skills to succeed and sustain the way that like you are with your expertise, especially because you've been an owner. So I think you're safe at least for a while, in my opinion.
We'll
I don't
see.
think it's coming for you.
We'll see, but you know what? It's gonna be like anything else, and I just had a whole, discussion with franchise consultants about this. Are you a broker or are you a trusted advisor? Right? And
Yes.
that's the
Yep.
difference in it. And so I feel that as long as I'm being the way I am and what my value add is, that AI is gonna push out what the Google bots have shown them to whatever at the top of the search engine. That's what the bots are going to be sending to the AI.
Yep.
And so that doesn't mean that it's the best. It just it's what it's seeing.
It's the
So
sponsored. Yeah.
yeah, right. Sponsored content. But as it gets better, I'm sure it's gonna become more, intuitive, but does it mean that it can have that conversation with this is a whole nother discussion for a whole nother day. But yes, the franchise systems, to answer your question, are absolutely utilizing technology every day for and embracing new technology for whatever they need for their business model. Look at when you talked about those gray lifeless boxes
I was
earlier,
literally about to bring that up.
that
Yeah.
they are seeing that people don't want to eat in, and so they only want dine they wanna drive through and that's it. They don't wanna dine in, and that's just kind of a culture tipping point that has changed, and so they are coming out with business models that have no dine-in, and it's purely just a drive-through feature, and, that pendulum may swing down the road, who knows? But they're embracing that and they're going, this is what the consumer's asking for. And so we have to meet them where they need to be. And that's all, again, part of that forward thinking.
Yes, but also when you make buildings look kinda like hostile, brutalist,
Oh,
gray
no, I'm not happy about
structures,
that.
yeah,
No,
I don't
it's
wanna
not
sit
that
in there
hideous.
anyway. Yeah,
No, I
so
agree. They're lifeless. I agree.
lifeless, boring buildings.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll kinda wrap it up here a little bit, and talk about you. So you've built your business around helping others succeed, and it's so admirable, and I've loved listening to you talk about other people. What have you learned about your own legacy through this work from being a franchise owner to this advocacy and advisory role?
Wow. Integrity is everything. And it's not an option. Like, it is just a must have. And I have just gone stronger and stronger toward that as I've been in this industry. And also sending out that mantra to all other consultants that I come across. And also talking about the seriousness of this and not taking it lightly and not sitting there. Like, I stay in touch with all of my candidates afterward, and I'm there as a resource for them and wanting to help them and give them guidance in whatever way that they need, right? Because that first year is so difficult. But I'll say to you that 5 years ago, when Milestone Franchising was born, I had written up my business plan and I'd said, in my business plan, I said, I will not be deviated from being an advisor, meaning that I'm not going to end up owning a franchise or going into franchise development. And I've been offered numerous jobs for becoming a franchise developer, repping a brand, then piquing interest of, oh, I like this concept. I think I want to own it. And I said, for 5 years, I will not do that. And I didn't. And I stayed true to it. And now I'm like, "Oh, I'm at the 5-year mark. Like, now where am I going? What am I doing?" And I've just decided that I'm gonna stay right where I'm at now, but now that has been lifted. So now it's like, "Oh, now I could sit there and think about, do I wanna go into franchise ownership again, or am I just staying in my lane doing the franchise advisory?" But now I'm literally back open for that. But I would say that anyone that I would hope, and it does appear to be, that people that know me, that are familiar with me, and they're familiar with my work, they do talk about that I am a trusted, well-respected person that is bringing integrity to everything that I'm doing. And that is there's no deviating from that ever. There's no expiration on that.
Interesting. So, what then does the future look like for Milestone Franchising? Are you gonna pass it on to someone else, or does it end with you?
That's a good question. So I've just now started thinking about, do I start bringing some people in underneath me, because I am not really going toward the business ownership side of it. So starting to bring some people in underneath me. I've been giving that some serious thought, as I'm thinking about some expansion ideas with this. And yeah, that's where I would go with this. My kids are not interested in this, so this is not going to be legacy for them. But it is where I think that next path is going for me, because I don't want it to end with me. I don't want it to be where, I hang up my franchise advisory hat and Milestone just goes away. And so if I could start bringing in new people and training them and teaching them the way of how I'm doing this, then I think that that would be a better thing for the industry overall, quite frankly.
I agree. I think you have so much to give. Like, I have learned so much in this. I'm sitting here thinking, like, could I possibly start a franchise? But I also have no time and no brain power left. If I did, it would just send me into a deep anxious depression, probably. I'm not the person. But I would love to work with you on literally anything. So I think
I
you have
appreciate
so
that.
much left to give, and whatever you could pass on to keep it going, it would just be great for business and keeping all of those big, stupid gray buildings out of my eyesight.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Morgan, and I appreciate what you're saying, and it's going to be very interesting to see what the next 5 years brings. Like it really is. I'm very interested in it.
I do as well, both like in a horrific way and also kind of a hopeful, positive way that people like you want to keep businesses and business owners alive and thriving.
Yeah.
Um, but that's kind of the end of what I had. Do you have any final notes, pieces of advice, anything you want to leave behind for those who may be listening to this and thinking like me that they have the time and the brain power to open up a franchise?
Yeah. So I always listen for people that say that they always wanted to own a business. As soon as I hear those words, I'm like, we're ready. Let's go. Right. It's more concernable for me when someone has lost their job and they're starting to panic and their severance clock is ticking and they're making panic decisions. And that's something that I am super careful and cautious about. But when they say, and I always like to reach people before they get to that point, before that, guillotine has come down on them. And I'm always trying to reach them and say, listen, if this is something that's ever been in the back of your head, there is never going to be a good time, ever. There is never going to be this like wonderful red carpet that just gets rolled out for you, and if this is something that you're thinking about, let's get started. Like, let's start having that conversation. And if the finances aren't there, great. Let's start talking about that so that you can start saving for it, just like you have to save for a home or a vacation or a wedding or whatever it is. And then you hit me back up in 2 years, and you start learning throughout that process, though, and start learning it the right way. That's really my biggest advice for people is don't panic in this. It is a really terrible job market out there. And so people start making some pretty bad decisions, and we don't want that. We don't want people getting harmed, because when you sign a lease, there is no forgiving that. There's no getting out of it, and it can really destroy you. It can destroy lives, and no one who wants that. Nobody wants that.
And in addition to that, do not use AI. Talk to Lisa, please, for the love of
There you
God.
go. I appreciate that too. Yeah.
So that is the end for us. That's the end of this episode of the Founders Roadmap. Huge, huge, huge thank you to our guest, Lisa Linkowsky, for sharing your insight, clarity, and the kind of practical wisdom that every founder needs to have in their back pocket. And I can't thank you enough. This has been a wonderful conversation.
I thank you, Morgan, and anyone can find me at Milestone Franchising is all of my social media. And I appreciate you for reaching out and setting this up. Amazing questions, and it's been really enjoyable.
Yes, we will put Lisa's information in the uh, show notes and all resources. I'll link that article that I found the wonderful quotes from before. If you enjoyed the conversation, please make sure to subscribe, leave a review, share this episode with someone building something bold. I don't know, they might need it. As always, I'm your host, and this has been the Founders Roadmap, where we break down the real steps, the real struggles, and the real wins of building something from the ground up. Thanks for listening, and we will see you on the next stop along this journey. Thank you.